That's why you're dealing with so many individuals who have to make decisions. I guess. It's crazy. That's fine.
Users from you, and everybody in the police department's from you.
You're good to start right at 6.
Oh, I will. It's not 6 yet, right, though? I got like 30 seconds.
Funny thing is,
Oh, we're down to
6 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're wrong.
it'd be like a little more yeah.
Now it's 6.
All right. All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Riverdale City Council for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Please let the record show that we have all members of the City Council present, with Councilor Hilton and Councilor Merrill joining via telephone. We have members of the public as well as members of the city staff with us tonight. We will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance from Councilor Stevens.
Could all please rise?
Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor Stevens. We'll now have our invocation by Councilor Arnold.
Our Father in heaven, we bow our heads this day and thank Thee for all our many blessings and opportunities that we have. We're thankful for this land, and we're thankful for all those that protect it. We're thankful for the administration of our city and all those that work diligently to provide a wonderful community that we're able to live in. We ask that Thou would guide us in all that we do, that we might be able to make decisions that would be beneficial to our residents, but also be in an effort to make a land that would be pleasing unto Thee. We're so grateful for our opportunity to serve, that we might be able to be enlightened and listen and understand the things that are presented to us, that we might be able to have an opportunity to create something that would be pleasing unto Thee. And please bless us this night with safety. Please bless our fire and police officers as they protect us throughout this night. We understand that the dangers they put themselves into for our benefit, and please bless them that they'll be able to return home safe to their families. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, we'll now have a time for public comment. This is your opportunity to come and address the council. You can share ideas, thoughts, concerns. No action will be taken during the public comment. As you approach the microphone, please state your name and your city of residence, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Mayor, could we just do a quick sound check, make sure the other two council members are present?
Yeah, Councilor Hilton, Councilor Merrill, can you guys chime in, make sure you're there?
I'm here.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, we can't see you, so don't hesitate to just chime in if you need to, okay?
Thank you. Will do.
All right. Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to presentations and reports.
I was kind of waiting to see if somebody stood up.
Oh, come on up
I
then.
do have something.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Gary Stoddard. I live in Clearfield. I was overjoyed when I found out that you've got 2 kayak parks on the Weber River, on your river. It's so beautiful. But I just came back from the Ogden Kayak Park where I was watching them do the Eskimo roll. It was so cool to watch. And then I want to get out there myself and do it. But you folks don't have easy access down to the water. They have at least 2 accesses down to the river, easily to get to and out of. I can only find one here. And I'd like to find something further south. So I volunteer to help clear a trail and make a path that these old folks can take their kayaks down to the water. Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move on to presentations and reports. For the mayor's report, I had just a couple of things. I was at the WACOG meeting last night. Oh, someone else?
She stood up.
Who stood up? Is she going to go now?
Yeah, she's gonna go now.
Okay. What's that?
My name is Christina Erkenbrack, and just kind of off what you were saying, how you passed the water right in 2018 for the water shares. So I got my building permit, started going through the process in April of 2020, and I've gone through all of the minutes, and it says water right transfer documentation that says applicant to review with Public Works. And then in the staff reports, everybody went through and said I have no concerns with Erkenbrack subdivision, I have no concerns, I'm good. Very similar to the Abbott project, I'm good. As you go further, and from my understanding, I was the first person that needed a water share since that law passed. So going forward, even to August, in the same documents, it now says water right transfer documentation. Applicant needs to show proof of water right documentation transferred to Public Works per City Code Title 8, Chapter 6, defer to PW Director. So I'm getting ready to close on my house, and I don't have a water share, and I need 2 from the Riverdale Bench Canal or 1 from Weber Basin. I don't have an additional $40,000 for the Weber Basin water. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out where I go from here, and I know this probably isn't the place, but I'm just wondering where it's different documentation and wording, if there's something, if I can make an appointment with City Council or how I go about doing this. So
we would probably have you talk with our Public Works Director, Douglas, and possibly.
We've had some communications on this. I'm a little bit familiar with it. Again, it puts us in a tough position. I don't know if you want to even discuss this right now. It's a public comment period, but they've even offered to post a bond, if I understood correctly, to cover that. The problem is we've never done that for something like that, and I don't know that we even have the authority to do it.
So when we were going through the process, the first time that I heard that we needed a water share was when we were boring under the road to connect to the water. And Sean talked to my dad and said, hey, you guys are going to have to provide a water share in order to get your water meter. I was full-blown, had my construction loan, foundation poured, boring under the road by the time this hit. And water shares are not cheap. So, and with COVID, everything in price went up. So, and I know this probably isn't the time, and it's kind of up to you how you guys want to.
I mean, we can continue talking to them. That was one of the reasons. I mean, I was hoping what we could discuss tonight, if we had any options available that the council saw for us. So as it stands right now, the code is what it is. So, and that would be what we would go off of. I mean, our forms change all the time, but what was law at the time was the 2018 code. So that would be in place.
So yeah, I would kind of watch the discussion tonight. I would encourage you to watch what's going to happen tonight and just see.
Where we
may discuss some other options. These guys make the laws, and they adjust the laws, and so we'll be having a discussion about that a little bit later tonight.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Once I look down, somebody usually stands up. Okay. All right, now we're going to go on to presentations and reports. For my report, I did attend the WACOG, Weber Area Council of Governments last night. Mayor Berube from North Ogden shared some interesting information. He had lunch with one of the state senators, I believe, and the state senator was very candid and said that the state is intent on taking zoning away from the cities. They just want to move it up to the state level, and that's what their plan is. And then he and I'm just reporting on this to you guys, but he said that it will give us a shield against the residents or developers or whoever, because then we can say, oh, we don't have any control, the state controls all that, and so we don't have to. But obviously we know that's something that we want to have, is the ability to do that. So The take-home message from that meeting last night was just once again, get to know your state legislators. Riverdale's kind of lucky because we do have two House districts now. We'll have 2 representatives in the House and 1 senator, Senator Milner. So just reach out to them, offer to, at least, just touch base. They're very receptive right now because they're running for election or re-election, and they are trying to get every vote they can. So I think they would recognize your name pretty quickly. And so.
Down those same lines, ironically, they did admit to trying this once before, and it was a disaster. And then they ended up giving them back to the cities. But they want to try it again. Maybe do it right this time.
This is all zoning?
Yeah.
So they would approve stuff that we don't want.
Well, they'll just write laws, and they'll tell you what you can do and can't do. So any control will be with the legislature. The city won't have any say in it at all.
They gave examples of, like in your single family or your quote single family housing zone, you can allow up to 8 units to be built on a lot. It would throw all our general plan that we're going to spend a lot of money to get redone. That would just all be a waste of money. It'd just go out the window so it's going to be a fight, and it's something you just reach out to them and make sure they know your name, know who you are. One other thing, they mentioned the air show that's coming on June 25th and 26th. That's the Warriors over the Wasatch. They are expecting around 700,000 people to attend that event. They are going to have people parked at the Freeport Center and be busing them in. It's a big deal. They haven't had it for a couple of years, and they're pretty excited about it. But that's something to kind of put in the back of your mind, that's going to be going on, whether you want to try and attend it or maybe try and avoid it. Either way, it should be pretty cool, but it's going to have a big impact on all of northern Utah, I think, if they bring 700,000 people in here. Council assignment reports. Anything from the council? Councilor Stevens, I had a question for you. Do you still attend the affordable housing meeting on that WACOG, before the WACOG?
I do.
You do? Did you attend the one yesterday?
I did.
Thank you. All right, that's
and
good.
So was
That's good.
I just didn't hit my unmute button quick enough before she moved on.
I did the same thing. It took me a minute, and then she called me out by name, so then I was embarrassed.
I wasn't on it. I wanted to attend yesterday.
It
but
was
I had
a waste of time.
Okay.
Because they had the league personnel there,
Cameron Delia.
and everybody wanted to voice their opinion. And since they had perceived that these people were an audience that wanted to hear what their issues were.
Okay.
But yeah, but some of them were more productive than others. But yes, I attend.
Well, I do appreciate you attending that. I go to the WACOG meeting right after it, but the 3:30 meeting's tough for me. And I was going to try to go yesterday, but I had like an emergency, and I was just like, I saw your name on it, and I saw a couple of people, and I was just hoping that someone would be able to attend it. So.
Were you there?
Thank you, and feel free to give us any input on that ever on the affordable housing that might be pertinent. Councilor Hanson, you City Council?
They have applications out right now.
Good.
And so I think they're just getting everything ready for the next season.
Are they helping with Old Glory Days at all, or?
I haven't heard if they are this year or not.
Okay.
I know that they've had a little bit trouble getting enough of them out at the same time, so I'll have to follow up on that.
I'm not trying to grill you guys. I just
No,
am
it's
interested
good.
in what's going on with.
Yeah, I mean, I hope a lot of the youth and their parents are interested in the Youth City Council because it's a really good program, and he's making some changes where it's kind of bringing what we had in the past and what they've accomplished in now with all the service that they do, and especially for the community events, they're trying to merge it into 2 things. So that way the youth will get kind of more of a government instruction and opportunity, but then we still get some really great service and opportunity there. So
Thank you. Very good. Thanks for serving on those. All right. Well, our third item is something I'm pretty excited about. We're going to recognize Mr. Dave Leahy for his service on the Veterans Advisory Group as the chair of that group. So we'd ask him to come up here to the front, and we have some stuff for him that we're going to present him with. Is the microphone going there?
like Christmas there, Dave. Look at all those goodies. He'll get those.
But they offer me.
Huh?
They offer me.
Mayor will show you here.
Well, okay, Mr. Leahy, we're super happy to have you here tonight. He has served on our Veterans Committee originally, and then most recently he was the kind of the chairperson of our Veterans Advisory Group. And he's done a great job representing the veterans here in Riverdale. We do have some really cool things for him. He had mentioned that he might like some of the flags off of the Veterans Memorial if we ever changed them out, and we did that recently. And so we have a whole set of flags for you, all the different branches of service. And I believe there's a U.S. flag here too. Is that right? There is. And then we've got this plaque here. We had one thing I'll tell you about Mr. Davies, he's the one that kind of kept us straight on everything. So he said, hey, we got a new branch of service, so we need to get a new plaque and a new flag. So this one, unfortunately, is not completely up to date, because this is the old one. But he's the one that had us add the Space Force. Come on over here, let's stand together. So this is the one we took off, and it doesn't have the Space Force on it, but he had a plaque with that, and then we added a flag also for the Space Force. So we appreciate him getting us to do that. And then we have a certificate for him, and it just kind of recognizes him. It says Outstanding Citizen Award from the Riverdale City Corporation hereby expresses sincere appreciation to Mr. Dave Leahy in recognition of the valuable contribution of service as chairman of the Veterans Advisory Board. And we just really appreciate all you've done. Yeah, you bet. And he has just been such a great servant to veterans here in Riverdale, and we're going to miss him. He's looked out for them and just he's been there for them. He's kept us in check. He's the one that kind of lets us know, hey, we need a new flag. Hey, we got to get this. The memorial's not looking great. We got to get that straightened up. We got things coming up. So we just appreciate him, and hopefully he'll still be around. Hopefully he's not going anywhere. So, but we just appreciate him and wanted to recognize him tonight. So, anyway, all this stuff is yours to hold home. And Dave, you want to say a couple of words?
You sure you want to hand me that mic?
Should we have him come to this mic?
That might be good, yeah.
Yeah, let's have him come to this one here. Okay.
Mayor, I might add too, all those flags have flown in our plaza out there. And Dave being one of the original members that even got that established, we thought that was fitting and appropriate that we gave you flags that have actually flown in there. So they won't be brand new, but you'll know that they were something that you did. So
Thank you. Thank you.
First off, I'd like to say how proud I am and honored I am. I'm very honored to have received the recognition for my work on the Veterans Memorial and on the advisory board. There's so many people that need recognition, that are the unsung heroes, and they're in the background, but to make that memorial out there, it took a lot of people. It took a lot of effort on people's parts to build it and make it what it is today. And I guarantee you it's one of the most prettiest and respectful memorials that is out there. Riverdale is just such a good city, and have worked with us and just put a memorial there that is second to none. Talking about the people that have done so much for the memorial that we never see, let's start at the beginning. I'll make this as fast as I can, but I just want to mention a few things. First of all, we started with a pen and a blank piece of paper and a pencil, and we were known as the Riverdale Veterans Memorial. Individuals that were going to do this, a committee is what I'm trying to say, the committee, and we were going to build this memorial. The city says, here's the paperwork, build it. So we got together and we started with just a piece of paper and a pen, and we put all our ideas down on paper, and we started. And you can see the results of what we did. But let's talk about some other people for just a second. Let's talk about the engineers we had to get in touch with. The engineers put so much work into that memorial. They designed those 4 islands that we got out there. They made everything so it fit. They made everything so it was perfect. Those memorials were 4 foot by 4 foot by 12 foot, and they use 11 cubic feet of concrete per memorial, per island. So it's a lot of concrete went in there. How about the contractors? I got to mention the contractors real quick because they're the ones that dug the holes, moved the blocks, put the rebar in, poured the concrete. Nighttime they worked, daytime they worked. They did such a wonderful job on that memorial. It's just outstanding. Then the people of Riverdale themselves. How many people donated to the memorial? They brought gift after gifts and money and stuff to help us build that memorial. Then there's the businesses. The businesses alone put out so much money for us so that we would have enough money to build the memorial the way that we wanted it. Just outstanding. I can't compliment them enough. And then we get back to the city itself. I'm telling you, this Riverdale city on that memorial has been nothing but outstanding. I mean, I'm talking about the mayors. I'm talking about the administrators. I'm talking about the council members. I'm talking about the maintenance people. Everybody has really chipped in and just put, well, you go out there and you look at the memorial and you can see what I'm talking about. Just outstanding. So this has been a journey for me that, it's just an outstanding journey that I'll cherish forever. It's really, I want to say. I got to tell you that the importance of the memorial, the people that cut the tiles and people that put the tiles on, they're all to be recognized. But I want to tell you just a quick thing that happens. When we put a tile on that memorial, we sit down, people on the advisory group, we sit with those people and we talk about what they want to put on their tile. And you can see the love that just comes from these people and the love that is poured out, saying how much they love the loved ones and what they want to say. Oh, my husband was in this and he flew this. And you know, he got the Silver Star. He got the Purple Heart. You know, he was in the Airborne. All these things just come out from these people. So it makes each tile that they put on there a special tile that, you know, that can be remembered, can be passed on to their children, passed on to their grandchildren, whatever it is. It's really outstanding how that has come along. 2 times we celebrate the memorial. It's really a big deal. One is Memorial Day, and the second one, of course, is Veterans Day. And these need to be kept going and always celebrate on those days for so we can recognize our memorials for all the freedom we have that they have put forth. A lot of people in that memorial just mean so much. There's people in there from World War II, Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, all those wars are on there. That really makes it nice. So we thank the city for all they did. There's 2 other people we got to thank. We have our freedom here, but at home we need to be protected also. And I want to thank our first responders, is what I'm trying to say, our fire department and our police department for all they do. Whenever we called them or we needed them for something to block traffic or they show up at every celebration. And they really make it a special place. And they put forth a lot of effort. What a great city we live in. Anyhow, again, I am glad I was able to take this incredible journey. And I want to thank everybody involved and say what an honor again it was to be part of the Veterans Memorial and make it what it is today. Thank you so much.
Let's give one more round of applause. Mr. Leahy's been to enough city council meetings. He knows to get out when the getting's good. So you get your business done and then you go. So we're super grateful to him. All right. Let's move on to our consent items. We have One consent item, it's a consideration to approve the meeting minutes from May 17th, 2022, the council work session and the council meeting. Do we have any corrections or changes to those minutes?
Just the changes that have already been made.
Okay. Any additional? Seeing none, and a motion would be in order to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve meeting minutes from the previous sessions as stated within the packet.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to our action items. The first one, number 1, motion to approve resolution 2022-15, amending the personnel policies handbook, chapter 12, substance abuse and drug-free workplace. Ms. Como, our human resources director, will present that.
So in our last legislative session, the legislature did pass Senate Bill 46, medical cannabis patient protection amendments. Those amendments give some public employers the right to hold medical cannabis cards and use medical cannabis for whatever medical related reasons they have. So I'm just asking you guys to approve a resolution so we can change our personnel policy and update our substance abuse and drug-free workplace policy to allow for the medical cannabis.
Any questions for Ms. Como? Councilor Arnold.
Motion to approve resolution 2022-15 as stated within the packet.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Michelle,
Second.
do I need to mention the change we made on that?
Sorry, hold on. We may have a change.
There was just one small change on the third whereas paragraph and was just spelled incorrectly. Some extra letters. It was,
Is this on the resolution?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah,
fixed.
not on
but
anything you did. It was they did.
It was a small.
The motion agrees.
Okay, so we have a motion, and I think I heard a second. Was that Councilor Merrill?
Both. They both.
Yeah.
in.
Okay, and any discussion on this motion? If not, Ms. Maragoni, will you poll the council, please?
Councilor Stevens?
Nay.
Councilor Hanson?
Aye.
Councilor Arnold?
Aye.
Councilor Merrill?
Aye.
Councilor Hilton?
Aye.
All right, motion passes with 4 in favor and 1 opposed. Ms. Como, did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say thank you.
Okay, and thank you for keeping us up to date on the laws and keeping us legal, so I
Thanks.
appreciate all you do.
Spelling and correctly.
All right, item number 2, consideration to approve resolution 2022-16 adopting the mutual aid agreement renewal between all Weber County Fire Departments. Chief Shawley.
Yeah, so this is an agreement between all the county fire departments and Weber Dispatch 911 that helps with the interface of our main control panels in all the stations. And so this would give us the annual maintenance we need to maintain those systems.
Is there any questions for Chief Shawley? Seems pretty reasonable. It's $500 and something. So.
Yeah. That's what happens when you split it up over a lot.
Yeah, when you split it over the whole thing. Okay. And Mr. Brooks, we don't need to include a dollar amount on this. Is that what the decision was?
Well, I mean, you can put it in there. That's not a problem.
What
But
was it? 516.
$585.75. It is auto renewed every year though, so we just have to. I'll watch that for sure and see if there's any increases on the maintenance costs.
All right. With that, a motion to be in order. Councilor Arnold.
Motion to approve resolution 2022-16 as stated within the packet with an emphasis on the expenditure of $585.75.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Maragoni, will you please poll the council?
Aye.
Councilor Merrill?
Aye.
Councilor Hanson?
Aye.
Councilor Hilton?
Aye.
Councilor Stevens?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Action item number 3, a discussion and action for further council direction for later city council meeting regarding water shares for H&P Investments LLC future Shake Shack site and others. Mr. Brooks.
I'll just briefly, just by way of background, I think everybody was here in the work meeting. There's just been some concerns about our water ordinance. We've been getting hit in numerous areas, and Mr. Katrubis in particular with their what formerly was the Farmers Building. They've torn that down, those of you who've driven by there, which is probably everybody. And the plans are that they will redevelop that with a Shake Shack franchise there. So when we started discussing this with them and notified them that our interpretation of this statute is on a redevelopment like this, when you're going from a small, especially in this situation where you're going from a small use to what's perceived to be a fairly high use. For those of you who don't know, those restaurants do consume way more water than you would expect. They're kind of surprisingly high, I think, when we compare it like with an In-N-Out or some of those. And so as Sean looked at this and we evaluated, we felt that truly was considered a redevelopment, and therefore it would require them to bring water shares with them. And Cord was concerned about that because he doesn't feel like they're getting fair treatment with what they already had some there, and why do they need to bring the whole thing? And the statute isn't really clear on that, so I think that's what he wanted to address the council about, and so that's where we're at. Sean can give you a lot more detailed information on the rates or the formulas that we use to come up with what we do have. But again, it's a fairly new statute, and it hasn't really been tested until this last year, and then we've been getting hit in all kinds of directions. And that's why we brought that proposed change to you back in April, which the change itself did pass because of the multi-family unit type structure that we didn't really account for originally. We didn't really run into this a lot until just this last year. Now it's just hit us like a tornado. Man, everything we have, it's what we're getting hit on. So, and even the residential deals here has come into play a lot more so. And a lot of that's just because they're not available. Back in 2018, you could have found water shares when we passed this. It wasn't a big issue. But this past year, it's gotten increasingly more difficult for anybody to find any water shares. So, and when they do find them, they're awfully expensive. So, whether you want to maintain this or give us some options to maybe look at different things, that's just we need some direction and understanding on what your interpretation of this is outside of what we've done. So. I don't know if you want to hear Cord's presentation or what he has to say. I mean, that's all I'll say from our side, unless you have questions for Sean, and we can get into more of the details if you need them.
Go ahead.
As we talked about in the previous meeting, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that I've talked to Mr. Brooks about this, Mr. Katrubis, and what was your last name again? Erkenbrack. Are you Mike Rubenet's sister?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I've had conversations with Mike Rubenet as well about this particular situation. So just so everybody knows, that I've had individual conversations with each one of these situations.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Katrubis.
Good evening. So specifically, I'm going to center this around the redevelopment part of Ordinance 8.6, or 8.6, sorry. The code has been interpreted that the landowners must bring their own water to the city under any redevelopment or before any redevelopment can take place. And for background, the Farmers Building has had water service that we have paid for up to the current, still paying for it. The meter remains on the property. However, as part of the discussion with the city to allow Shake Shack to build on the property, even though we already had a water service, we needed to buy water shares and convey them to the city as part of the redevelopment of that property. During construction of Brands Way, D. Hansen stubbed a new water line into the farmer's property. Hard to say direction, but let's call it the east side of the property, back by the apartments, because originally we were going to subdivide that property and make it 2 parcels. When Shake Shack decided they needed the whole space, he had already stubbed the water line, so we ended up making them the tenant of the whole 1.2 acres. So the heart of the issue is the water service remains on the property. The service is current with the city, obviously. Based on what we were being told or the way the ordinance is being interpreted, we need to forgive that water service completely and then bring enough water shares to the city to equal an estimated use of Shake Shack and then turn around and pay monthly for that water we were being told to convey to the city. So the current water service that we have has been a connection to the city water system, has been counted as a connection for many years. We'd like to understand why we cannot use the connection for Shake Shack, whether we use the old line or the new one and cap the old one, but it's still one service to that property. Ordinance 86 seems not to recognize current water service at all. What water is always, as an ERC, from an ERC perspective, equivalent residential connection perspective, that water's already there. It's the total amount of water you need to bring, which is for the whole project. We're not adding any more buildings. Based on the site plan that a lot of you have seen, Shake Shack has submitted. They're removing all of the sod and xeriscaping most of the property to really conserve water. Yet, based on the interpretation of the ordinance, that is irrelevant, that we already have a water connection. So what I'm bringing to the City Council tonight is a thought process of looking at 8.6, specifically in the redevelopment situation. I understand from a development perspective when you are adding water connections to the city water service that have not been there, that water needs to be brought in from elsewhere. We can't run out of water. But we have connections already in the city that are counted as an ERC in this city already, and there's nothing in the ordinance that seems to give you any credit for those ERCs already. Based on the latest engineered report that Sean's department did, and I got to tell you, I wouldn't be in his position at all at this point with this whole water thing. They've considered ERC in this city as a 0.91 acre feet of water. Well, if you're 0.191 feet of acre feet of water, which is give or take 300,000 gallons a year, shouldn't there be some credit if you already have a connection to your lot of 0.91 before we start bringing more water to the city and just give up the 0.91? So that's what I'm bringing to the council, is to look at 8.6 and maybe do some definition of what redevelopment is. I don't want redevelopment to stop in this city. We've redeveloped a lot of stuff in the city already, a lot of old buildings, and renewed the city and put a new face on it, and are going to continue to do so as long as it's feasible. But I'm very worried specifically in the fact that water shares are going to kind of become the subcurrency of development in the city. If you can't find them, or you have to pay what you have to pay, is it feasible to take an old building, knock it down, and make it new, because now you don't get credit for the connection, and you have to bring that much water to the city just to redevelop an old building or a blighted area? Seems to me it's going to slow development, if not halt it, redevelopment. Now, development's a whole nother thing. And, you know, when you're doing a subdivision like they're talking about doing at Waterview, and you can spread that cost among 40, 50, 60 homes or whatever they're going to do, it might be a little more feasible. But when you're just taking one building down and putting another building up to reface Riverdale Road, pretty tough to start putting, as the Erkenbrack pointed out, Davis Weber 3 acre feet shares, $40,000. You can't find Riverdale Bench Canal shares. They're difficult. There's very few people that own them, and they own a lot of them. And most of them don't use them all, including the school district has a whole bunch of them, and they don't use them, but you can't buy them. So if you can't buy a water share, it kind of stops land use in the city. I mean, nobody can develop their land unless they have it. And so I understand the water shortage situation, and again, I don't beg to have Sean's job in any way, shape, or form right now, but there has to be a little more consideration of what the possibilities are. Because if it's just about you have to bring water shares, it's going to stop anybody from taking old buildings down and putting new ones up and try to renew the city as it grows and ages more than anything. So that's all I had to say.
Any questions for Mr. Kurbis?
Oh, I have one for Sean.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. You're good to go.
Sorry.
Okay. Councilor Hanson.
Because that was, the original building was an office building, was it only a 3/4 inch connection?
So I think they actually have a 1 inch there.
They do.
The big difference that you're going to see on something, so courts redevelopment, we don't read in the ordinance, we don't really even pertain to connections in there.
Right.
We're more concerned with water, and it does not currently give them any credit for the water they use. So that building, from what I can see, is typically used, and looking at other buildings of that size and type of use in Riverdale, they typically use 1,000 gallons a month, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So you're looking at possibly 12,000 gallons a year if you was looking at that type of use. Now, if I look at something, and I don't have a Shake Shack to compare, but if I look at some that like Mike and others have told me is probably comparable, if I look at a In-N-Out or a Chick-fil-A or some of them, you're looking at a use that's probably 140 to 160,000 gallons a month. So you could go 10 to 12, 15 years even on the one building for what you're going to use in 1 month on the new building. We don't have any way to get credit in there, and if you did decide to do some kind of credit, I would propose the credit wouldn't be for like a connection, per connection. It would be based on previous 3 years' use, so that's equitable. We have to base what we're telling the state and what we're buying for water and what we're using for water on what's currently being used. And so to have to try and guess what somebody's going to redevelop in 5 years and use, that's a hard guess for us. But that's kind of where we're at. And right now, to me, it's clear in the ordinance. There's a few ways out of it if you're redeveloping. That's if you've pretty much provided water in the past. But we could definitely look at that and see if there's a way that we could. It wouldn't be hard to come up with like a 3-year average if you wanted to go that way.
But the current code doesn't allow you to do that.
It does not. It says that if you provided, pretty much says if you provided water. There's like 3 caveats in there that it would let you do. So that's pretty much where we're at. So it gives you an exception if you've previously you did water rights, if you're a government agency, or we had an abundance of water is the 3 caveats for redevelopment.
Councilor Stevens, did you have something?
Yeah, a couple things. How do you assess, okay, just use Mr. Court's property. What's the assessment of how many shares he was to provide for?
So they will do engineering on their use, and they will bring that to us based on their engineering, their use.
Their engineering or ours?
Theirs. We will review it, and then we'll ask them to provide based on what they're doing, as long as we somewhat agree, because we can look at other uses. And then there's also a caveat in there that if they go over what they've said they're going to in the next 2 years consistently, then they have to provide more water. So they can't just come to us and say, "Oh, we're only going to use."
It's not arbitrary. There's a
mechanism in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's what I was looking for. And this is kind of maybe off the top of my head here, but having worked and lived in areas where the government regulates things, let's just say for milk production, you have to have a base, or tobacco production, or whatever production, so that you don't flood the market. And you have, hypothetically, if you're producing milk, you produce 1,000 gallons. I'm using some just random numbers. 1,000 gallons, which is about 80 head of cattle a week or whatever. If suddenly your herd drops, but you have the base to produce that kind of product, it's very common for people to sell it or trade it for another farmer, say, who suddenly has had an increase but doesn't have the base that allows him to produce, in this case, dairy product or milk. It sounds like this water shares is becoming a commodity. If there's a lot of owners who are not using it, perhaps this could be a revenue generator for them, that they lease, or they lease the base for, much like a dairy farmer does. And now, I don't know if there's anything in the work. I'm just speaking off the top, because if you have something that's valuable and it's not being utilized, is there a mechanism, and again, I'm just speaking rhetorical, that allows for, say, to purchase 5 years or lease 5 years, and then they can provide that to the city in lieu of and then, have 5 years to come up with the appropriate number of shares. And I just, that's just an idea.
So I've never seen a lease agreement like that. Typically, the lease agreements that we've seen on water shares or water districts like that is somebody they'll use that person's shares for the year, and what they typically do is pay their dues to keep their dues current, so they don't pay their annual dues on their water. But as far as a formal agreement and a long-term agreement, I've never seen that. I can't say it hasn't been done, but it's pretty hard to tie up somebody else's water shares. It would have to be between the owner of the share,
Sure.
and so I mean, anything's possible. I
throw that out there because if things go in cycles, I truly believe that. By the way, droughts usually weather goes in 7-year cycles. That's just having worked with climatologists and whatnot. But
so one of the big things that's hurting really bad right now is when these major water suppliers come down and say, okay, we're going to take a 40% reduction in irrigation water for the farmers. Some of these farmers have extra shares, right? And every once in a while, they'll throw some out there just to gain a profit, maybe go buy a new tractor or whatever they're doing. Well, when they need X amount of water, say they need 50% of what they own, and then they take 40% away off the top, what last year was extra shares, now this year's just letting them produce a crop. So you're not seeing them extra shares float. You'll see the same thing with, and they're associated with the golf course. They're in the same bind out there because if they have a reduction on flow to their area, they want extra shares so that they can cover that if there's a reduction. And so they're not willing to sell shares. So it makes it really tough to find shares. And then if you look at the amount of development going on in Davis and Weber County right now that these water's all tied to, it's crazy. And they're getting a premium price for it. 6 acre feet right now selling on Davis Weber for $40,000 to $45,000 is what I've seen.
And is that one share?
So most of the Davis Weber water, one share is 6 acre feet. I mean, they have half shares and they have different
That's
things.
what I was going to ask you. Do we accept percentage shares?
As long as it covers,
yeah.
Yes. So if they needed 3 acre feet and they bought a half share of Davis Weber, then yes. The other thing you notice, you guys do the budget every year. We keep money in that account to buy water shares. So if somebody goes to buy a water share and they're like, well, we only need a half of a share, but the only thing I can buy is a full share, we've always offered to buy the remaining shares and bring them into stock. So we have worked with other developers doing that didn't need the full purchase.
And have you seen a lot of people wanting to lease shares right now with the drought conditions?
I look to buy. I haven't been looking to lease because we have. So the other thing that we have to do is we can't use the water out of the canal, right? So we actually have to, when we get a water share, if it's in a canal or the Davis Weber, the Bench Canal, the Weber River, whatever, we have to transfer diversion. So we no longer take it out of that canal. We take it out upstream. Then it comes through Weber Basin's treatment plant. So that would be another thing that's problematic on the lease, is we actually have to. And right now we're still in negotiation with the state on being able to transfer the Bench Canal diversion upstream. So that's always a problem too, is you do have to totally change the diversion on it.
Councilor Arnold.
One thing I think we need to be really careful with leases, because then it ties you into what you're doing for X amount of years. I think our treatment through Weber Basin Water is a 50-year agreement.
We've got 25, I think, and 50s.
I think it was a 25 with an option of 25 or something that we put in. But in 50 years, we're basically at their mercy. And if we lease water and develop, when the lease option runs out, we got a lot of problems, negotiating, then it just increases that water value. But I think there's 3 things that we need to do here tonight from what's here. And one is we need to look at the ordinance again and figure out, how we can make that work. We don't want to tie your hands, but also, water is valuable, money is not, I still go with that. As we talked about from the previous discussion with the ordinance, but with the Shake Shack, I think looking at how much water goes through a connection is done through the bill. It's like any home. If you know, somebody gets a building permit or something and they redevelop their home and a family of 7 moves in where a family of 2 moved out, their rate's going to go up. So I think the ERC that they're talking about, and just from my conversation with Cord earlier, what you talked about Richfield and Saratoga Springs? What were their ERC as far as their gallons? What was their equivalent? Do you remember?
John's got them in front of him, but I think it's around 200 gallons a day is their ERC. And so it's about 0.2 to 0.3 acre feet a year per household.
So just to clarify that real quick, you can't use that comparison. Both of them have pressurized irrigation systems. So if you look at a pressurized irrigation system compared to us, so if you remember when we was talking about the apartment complexes, we talked about that they're using a typical homeowner without the outside use type thing is using in that 0.3 range in Riverdale right now. And then when you have your water losses and all that, it came up to the 0.41. So we are really close to what them other communities are if you take out the irrigation. So that's why our number's 0.1 is because we are watering everybody's lawn with this same allotment of water. When you look at Kaysville or one of these other cities, they've got an allotment of water over here for outside irrigation, and then they've got their culinary. Well, the numbers that, and I'm not dissing on Court, but the numbers that he's using on there, that's only inside water usage. So if you went and took the number of water that they're using on the outside, added to that, they would probably be really close to where we're at.
Well, I think as we determine our water, that's one thing we should look at is a normal household has X, and then you add irrigation on top of that, so you have X plus irrigation equals the bill, you know, or something like that.
That's the 0.91 ERC. That's exactly what we did.
Right, but if we have 0.91 for me, who I have xeriscape, you know, on a high percentage of my yard, versus someone that doesn't, you know, we're still looking at the 0.91, right?
The problem we have is when that developer comes in and brings you a subdivision for you to approve, you have no idea what they're going to put in for landscaping.
Right.
And so to try and, how do I guess on that lot, okay, this guy is going to use half of what that guy is on his landscaping. It's based on averages of what we've seen throughout the city based on the average use of the city. So some guys are going to be way higher. You're going to have a neighbor that's using 5 times that. And you're going to have you that's maybe using a third of it. We just try and do an average that's down the middle of the road on homeowners. On the commercial properties, the ERC doesn't play like that. It's based off of actual projected use.
Okay. So when you have like the connection and then you have like the quick quack coming in and it's just nothing but water. I mean, it's open, whatever, but, you know, what did we do with them? And you don't need to answer now, but I mean, that's just a question that would.
I will answer it because that's what brought you this ordinance. If Roger was still here to speak to it, that's exactly what brought you this ordinance. We went from a building that used 500 to 600 gallons a month on that same corner and redeveloped it and went to 400,000 to 800,000 gallons a month. It was a redevelopment. It's in the same spot on property, right? They have one connection, still have just one connection, but they went from using 6,000 or 7,000 gallons a year to using 400 to 800,000 gallons a month. That's a big change as far as what you're having to put in through the city. It all comes down to how you want to spread it out.
Right, and I think we need to bring the ordinance back as soon as possible, but we don't write ordinances, you guys do. I mean, you write them.
You tell us what you want in it, and that's what we can put in it.
Because I don't even know if the farmer's insurance has ever really been there in the last how many years, you know. And I don't know what the Shake Shack or any other type of business like that is going to bring in sales tax revenue. So I think there should be some offset somehow like that. But I was in my conversations with Cord is like, I was under the impression originally that they were going to split it into 2 lots, and he agreed, and I agreed that to make another water connection, he needs to bring water. Just changing that and adding the water usage, you know, we need to be able to look at that, because I think people need to take buildings down and redevelop them, just like we would stall D in that whole project, right? I mean, because since 2018, have we had all of the businesses along there, bring water and, which I don't know. I mean,
We have.
have you?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's just, but I think having that connection, and I think
Christina, just
the Christinas, the Christinas, they had a building permit issued, and I think Riverdale should honor that. And I don't know when it was done.
It was after the ordinance.
Permit?
The building permit was done after the ordinance.
No.
Yes.
Well, the 2018, but you also had the in lieu of back then, where the one we just passed is the only one that has the in lieu of cash out of. So, I mean,
Right.
I
So
don't know
the
if you were
ordinance
able
was
to
there as
connect.
far as that, but as far in the last meeting, you asked us to take out, or the last time we talked about this, you asked us to take out the fee in lieu of.
And that's what I think so interesting because you were the big pusher for that, and you've made a big flop since then. And I'm trying to
no,
understand
it's not a flop.
because you pushed for that, and we all wanted to keep it in.
So
And now all of a sudden you're on the
have you
developer's
been on
side.
Have you been on South Weaver Drive?
Yeah,
Did you see their house?
yeah.
They don't have water. Do you have a connection to the water? It's connected.
We're connected to we're connected to the water line, and we have a box there, but we have no meter.
So this was passed in April, and I think to go and say, hey, we have a house built on South Weaver
Well, I
Drive.
mean, her situation
So I'm
aside,
talking
it's
about
different.
three situations.
Yeah.
One is the Shake Shack,
Yeah.
which they've already started tearing it down. They got a water connection. They have a house built.
So, do you still feel as strongly as you did then? The development should be halted, new development, if they can't provide water share.
Yes.
Okay, that's the part I was really confused because it felt
So
like
when we passed the ordinance
switch.
in April, whatever meeting that was,
Yeah.
I think anybody who's, especially if if the motor view comes in and they have a connection, I don't know what they have there.
represent the motor view.
No, you don't.
Well,
You represent the builder, the paper lot builder that destroyed Coleman subdivision with the same type of thing and took the water shares and sold them privately.
We're not having this
Anyway.
discussion, so.
Okay. Anyway,
So you're still on board with the
absolutely.
change.
I
Okay.
think it's very important that
But
we,
now you want specific situations to be looked at differently.
the ones that were there prior to April,
Okay.
for sure.
And I agree. I think
But anything that
the
comes in,
ordinance needs to be updated and credit should be provided. But I think if the water usage changes, they need to provide the difference
yeah,
in
we
water
need, we need to figure out water. And I think one of the things that the Cord said to me is, we're saying, the sky is falling, but we don't really have numbers. And you know more about this than I do. And with us making decisions and things like that, we need to have numbers and say, what is X amount of water divided by this many users? I don't know what X is. And you don't really either, like you said, year to year, what our water is. But if we plan on plenty and deal with what we're dealing with now, it's a problem. And, but we can't stop development. But I do think that if we authorize development, we hold to our word, and instead of holding I think it's crazy that, because prior to our meeting in April, their house is ready to move in. They're tearing the building down. The motor view's being sold, got it, understood. Up on Ritter Drive, the piece between the storage units and River Glen, they've got a rezoning request in there for that. All of that they need to have water on these new developments. When you're taking a motor view drive-in or a drive-in and talking about putting in 60 homes, it's a huge increase. I don't know how many homes they're talking about over in the pylons or whatever by the storage sheds, but I'm not flip-flopping on the ordinance at all.
No, I get
It's
that
like,
makes more sense.
know.
But still, an office building to a restaurant is a huge I was the utility billing manager in South Jordan. It's a huge increase, and so to say, yeah, let's just do a fair swap. That just doesn't make any sense
But
when
saying
you're
where-
going to 100,000 plus a month
But where we're at, on
in the process.
even an individual residence, you know, if you have two people living in a residence and a family of 7 moves in, I mean, what is that? Somebody puts in a pool. Does the water ordinance go? I mean, now, I don't know, because we've dealt with the pool ordinance before.
So residential deals strictly with ERCs. We're not going to go in and individually try and specific duty to what a house. It's just,
Right,
it's
so
impossible.
so what is an ERC 0.91?
That's what the
calculate
average
to?
person in Riverdale uses.
What if we have our own secondary water source though? So we're not using your
Is this a
water.
discussion, or are we trying to maintain some
So-
decorum here?
So, and if I can speak back to what you said about
Well, if you have something to
about
say,
wire
just let
shares.
us know. We'll have you come up to the microphone.
Okay.
So, I've just talked with these folks, you know, for extensively this week, and so in April or whenever we was talking about this, that we took the fee in lieu of, and we talked about that a little bit, but she is at the point where she can't afford. So our ordinance at that time was based on selling it at the price of a Davis Weber share, right? She's and maybe this changed since then, but she can't afford to buy water at that price. So even if you had that in lieu of there, it would still be a problem for her at the current price. The other thing to remember is the land that she bought does have water shares associated with it when she bought them, but they didn't transfer the water shares to her. So the previous owner, just like what you as references up on Coleman's Farms, where it stayed with the owner and then they did something different with, that's pretty much what's happening on her place as well.
Well, and I'm not, so the ordinance changed in April.
Mm-hmm.
They are, whenever they got the building permit time frame, they should fall under the fee in lieu of. Kind of like grandfathered in. I mean, wouldn't
And
that
if
be
you
fair?
want-
No,
if
it's not what I
council
want.
agrees
I'm
with
just
that.
saying, is it fair?
But I think the fee in lieu of said the city can accept the fee if we have water shares to sell.
Right.
But, so the building permit should have been, that should be part of the building permit to say, we don't have shares at that time, you don't get a building permit. We did get a building permit. So, but the fee in lieu of should still apply. I'm not saying it should be waived or anything like that. The building permit was issued in 2020, you said? And the ordinance was passed last month, or I guess April. They shouldn't, we're not bypassing the entire, they should fall under the ordinance that was in place in 2020.
You want to come up to the microphone for a minute?
They have not asked to do the fee in lieu of.
And that's your discussion with them as they continue that, sure.
Okay.
So in this process, when we went through it, got our building permit, I mean, we spent a year going through planning and doing the things that we had to do. It wasn't until we dug the foundation and was putting the water line in and that we understood that we needed a water share. Nobody had communicated that to us. If you go back to your council meetings right after us, in every council meeting or planning commission meeting, you guys say in that meeting that you have to have a water share to build, right? We didn't know that at that time. That puts these kids under a huge duress, especially with the price of everything going up. And we have a secondary water source already. We're tied into the golf course. This is a family community. There's not other homes going to be built in here from other people. So it's just the water that they use inside their house is it.
Who's the contractor on the project?
I am.
In your name?
Brent Kenley, North Shore Excavation, North Shore Rock Products. But in every meeting, we went through them today, and every meeting that you guys have told them straight up, you need a water share. We didn't know that until far into it, and then there was no turning back at that point.
Yeah, Councilor Arnold.
So one of the things you're saying In every meeting, they were told they needed a water share,
Yeah.
but they didn't know it.
Yeah. Well, the other in your council meetings, as we went back and watched them, people were applying. They were told that they needed a water share.
So, I mean,
We weren't told that. We were
as a contractor building in Riverdale, that's your responsibility, not theirs. Not even theirs. You took on the contract to build on the property, so it's in the ordinance, right, Steve? I mean, the ordinance is there. As a contractor building in Riverdale, that's your responsibility.
to go through your ordinances and find out that you needed a water, that I needed
If you're
a
a
water
contractor
share
on
for
a
that.
job, you just can't go take your track, go in there and start digging. I mean,
We hired an engineering company to take this through approval for you guys. The engineering company was paid thousands of dollars to do that process. That's not something I go ask the city, do I need a water share? When you're telling everybody else out there, except, and I get it. We came in the process early on when you had just changed, right? And then as you guys started to graduate and understand what you were trying to get people to do, you were telling them in planning commission, you need a water share. You need a water share before you can develop, before you get your permit. I mean,
so I mean,
it was never displayed.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, but you have a water share. You just don't want to give it up.
No, we don't have a water share.
It's tied to the property. The family has it. The property had it.
You might get a free golf game out of Ernie Schneider, but you ain't getting a water share. I don't care if you're his granddaughter or his wife.
I don't know what to say. I don't.
And I think everybody in here already knows that.
Knows what? That I can go golf at Riverside?
We've asked for the
So
share.
Steve, am I right or not on?
Well, I think you're
ordinance?
both right in some degree. I mean, you're certainly right that ignorance of the law is not an excuse. It's not a defense when it comes down to that. So, yeah, I think that part of it's right. But I also think what he's saying is right, is I don't know how well we communicated that, at least in the initial part.
Let me speak to that. So I did mention it to the engineering firm when they was bringing it through that there was water rights associated with them. Now, whether they communicated that back or not, I don't know, but it was brought up.
So we went through all communications today, emails, the process with you guys, and there was never, unless it was a verbal.
It was a verbal conversation, and they called several times throughout the process and talked just verbally. Engineers do it all the time. Not everything is done through an email or something like that. So if you go back and ask them,
and I guess
think
what we're
they
saying is we don't, we get that you need the water share, right? But where we're not hooked in and we're not using it for secondary water, we'd be giving you guys way more water than we would be using. So, that's something that,
And that's like I said to them when we met the other day, that's great. They've got the water to use. They have no way to permanently tie it to the property because they don't own it. So if they move on or Ernie sells off and sells the water shares with it, there's no way to keep that tied with the house in the current situation. He'll allow them to use the water right now for outside use, but as far as perpetuating it or it being tied to a deed or a claim or a right of any kind, there's nothing there. It's a verbal agreement for now.
So, and I just think in the three things that I said of the three things, one, it's a new connection, and the ordinance was there. There's really nothing that we can do about it. The ordinance is there, and whether your engineering firm missed it or something like that, there's really, you can petition the council, I guess, to waive that because we have that process. If it's on the agenda to waive that particular part of the ordinance, you can do that. I think the Shake Shack or the Farmer's Building has a connection, and we don't have anything in writing that says that this connection is hooked to X amount of water. And maybe we need to put that together. And the third thing is when we revisit the ordinance and say, if we have an estimation of how much water somebody will use, then, this is how much water they need to bring. If it's a brand new connection versus it's a existing connection with an office building going to a restaurant or something. We need to have those numbers and even have a table just like our,
We have that,
our
right?
fees and
What's
stuff.
that?
The office building to the restaurant, we have that conversion.
No, we're just using what,
Yeah, we don't have a table.
it's not in that, it's not, and you couldn't, I don't know how you would do a table because every single one of them is going to be different. I can look at restaurant A to restaurant B throughout Riverdale, and they're not consistent. It depends on how many fixtures they have in there, what type their food processing is. I mean, it has to be somewhat viable, and that's why we look back to the developer to provide us. I mean, these guys that are building this Shake Shack, this isn't their first Shake Shack. The outside watering might be a little bit of a gamble to them on what they're going to need. They're going to know within several thousand gallons or 10,000 gallons of what they're going to need to run this business. They run it everywhere else. So we give them the benefit of the doubt and rely on them to provide us with the correct number when they come to develop. And that's why the ordinance is wrote that way. It's not tied to an ERC. It's tied to what their usage is. And then it does have it in there so they can't just come in and say, oh, we're going to use 1,000 gallons. And then in next year, they're using 400,000 gallons a month. So there is that in there to protect us that says if you provide us with a low number and then that doesn't prove to be true, then you do have to provide the additional water. But we allow them the benefit to pick how much water they're going to use per se. And all that does is provide the city with the amount of water. Now, as far as treating that water every year, that's when you go back to the water bill. That's what that pays for. That doesn't pay to buy the water. That pays for us to deliver it and to treat it. That's what the water bill costs pay for. It doesn't pay to buy new water.
We just need our ordinance to reflect that.
So I'll get out of your hair, but do we fall under this? Are we grandfathered in before you change the ordinance? Because you changed the ordinance last month. So we should be able to pay a fee in lieu of.
That would be up to the council.
Water share.
They did
The
that.
fee is the cost of the water share, right?
Yeah, and on the ditch, what's the lower ditch?
It's based on Davis Weber. The fee in lieu of is based on Davis Weber water.
At 40,000.
Correct.
If I could just respond back to something on that. The ordinance itself was in place. What changed in April, the ordinance is still there. That hasn't changed. The only thing that changed is we added a different rate for the multi-housing, and you took out that language. That language doesn't really apply to them anyway. So the ordinance that was in place is still in place and still applies to them. That's the dilemma we have. So I don't see how you could make an argument that it's grandfathered because that doesn't really apply. None of the changes applied to them. Just because you change part of an ordinance doesn't change all of it. So that's still in place. One of the things that we have, like when, just for an example, and I'm not saying we do this because I haven't really had time to think about it, but where they proposed bonding for that to buy them time, I looked at that ordinance and I don't see how I can agree to that because, one, I don't know how to do it. I mean, we're going to have to research this thing a little bit deeper, but two, I don't know that you gave me the authority to do that. And so that's kind of where I'm stuck, and same thing with leases. If we looked at something like that, I already know that I have the authority under the ordinance as it's written right now that I could even do that. I mean, it's pretty rigid. And so for us to even explore some of these other options, we need to get that from you because as it's written right now, I don't think we have a lot of options. It is what it is, and that's what we've enforced. So.
Okay, let me ask a couple of questions. So, this can fall under the sheriff's questions especially for others, but Commissioner Jenkins said last night that no permits for water have been denied, no applications for residential. Some agricultural have been, but no residential. So this is kind of separate from water shares a little bit, but it's in replacement to the water shares. Could the city decide to just purchase water from Weber Basin at a higher rate? And maybe we change the ordinance, we bring it back to these folks and they can do whatever they want with it, but maybe we look at doing, because this is a problem, it's not going away. Like,
for sure.
we look at, okay, the water shares is not working. Maybe we say, okay, we'll purchase water, we'll make applications or whatever. Weber Basin, help me if I don't understand this right.
No, you're right.
And it's about 7 times what we used to pay for it. It's $700 a block.
You buy what you call a block of water.
You buy it, and it's a lot more now than it was when all these other folks live.
And we pay that every year. So
so
we
we
don't.
gotta
It's
pay it
not a
every year.
one-time deal. It's like a contractual agreement to buy the X amount of water from them each year on top of what we already buy.
So maybe the ordinance needs to be something along the lines of, we get rid of the water shares. You don't have to bring them anymore. But when you come to Riverdale, you're going to be brought in under a new rate structure, these new blocks of water, and that way it doesn't spread it out to all the residents that are already here, that have been here. But you buy water at a new rate structure. Why are you laughing at me? Don't start laughing. Like, I'm trying to understand how water works.
No, because I'm been right where you're going, and we've been working on this for the last month and a half, trying to figure out a way to make something like that work. Because from what you guys have told me in the past is we didn't want, as a city, we didn't want new development to come in, bring water costs associated with the new development that's probably going to either be new homes or new money makers for somebody, and then pass that cost on to the current residents. Do I understand that that's what the goal had been in the past? Because that's the way I took it.
Because Weber Basin has water, they'll sell us.
They will sell us. Unless it's changed in the last month, they have water, they'll sell us.
Commissioner Jenkins thinks they do.
But as a city, you didn't want to pass these new higher 7 times the costs on to the existing residents to accommodate new growth. New growth had to pay for itself. So we have currently been looking at ways that we've looked at special service districts. We're looking at rate tables. How could we do it that we can allow some continued growth that's easier than going out and buy water, but it doesn't affect the current residents? But if a new resident's coming in and they come into a house and the water rate's higher, they know that when they come in, right? Because they're buying a new home, they're on a different block. We're looking at stuff like that because it's going to get nothing but worse. We know that. It's just what is it? And there's you look at how many cities in their state, every city does something different, right? What works for Riverdale? And that's what we're trying to do, is figure out what works the best for Riverdale, and lets us meet the goals that I feel like you've given us, not to pass them costs on to the current residents.
And we have to answer to our residents. I mean, every time they see a house or a building going up, they're like, I can't water my lawn, but you're building another house. So if we could say, hey, bring us an ordinance, whoever's going to write it or come up with it, that says, hey, we're going to bring these people in at the new water rate, and it's a nightmare for you guys to track them, but you guys are on the 2022 water rate, and your water rate is this.
That's exactly where we've been going. And to their credit, the developers at Coleman or the drive-in brought that into us originally, and we explored a special service district, and they brought in water experts that we've been consulting with and going back and forth on. A special service district we thought initially would work, but it's not. But our saving grace in this whole dilemma is the state passed a statute just last year, I think. Somebody saw this coming, and they now allow the city to implement different rates. And so then we started going down that path of coming up with our own ordinance so say we put everybody that's currently on there, they're in Block A, and then we do a Block B for the next 5 years or whatever, just because those rates change. This is going to be a nightmare, not only drafting it, but enforcing it, which is going to cost Sean's department to have to evaluate those rates every year, depending on what the cost of water is going to be. But that's the only thing I can see that's going to work, because this is going to be tough. The scary thing about that is I can't find anybody that's done it. So we'll be plowing new ground. I have found 2 cities, Bountiful and Riverton, that they have different rate structures. It's based on different things, but I think we can use the same idea. So Bountiful, for example, depending on how far up the hill you are, your water costs more. And so I'm looking at the same thing, just depending on when you tie it into the system, your water's going to cost more. So same principle. And I think we can do it, but it's going to be interesting, to say the least. And like I said, we're plowing new ground here. I think other people will do the same thing once we get it done, but it makes me a little bit nervous, just because I can't find anything that's already been done. But I only see that solution. I know Sean's not really excited about it. I don't know that I'm really excited about it, but I don't see other options to do this.
Water shares just aren't working. They're just,
well, but
they're
then
not
the concern is, if they're not working, that means there's no water. So like we can do this new block of water thing, but we can't. We put it into ordinance. What happens when Weber Basin is like,
Exactly.
yeah, there actually is no physical water. So good for you
Right.
that you're paying this
Right.
huge amount.
Right.
We're
And-
still going to have
right.
to cut you out. And then what do we do? Because we've got development going on where
Right.
we've told them in this ordinance, oh, just pay more for
And-
air. I guess, like, what do we do?
And the
So you
risk
can't
on that
just
is it
ignore
will
it.
affect everybody because we would have to cut everybody's water usage at that point. I mean, it may not now, but
Does
it will
impact
if
all
it.
the residents
it-
regardless.
yeah.
In the end.
And potentially could be pretty scary, to be honest with you. But they're tied into the system then, so you wouldn't have a choice.
And legally, we've got this ordinance where we've told developers, yeah,
Right.
go ahead and come in and build. And
Right.
because we've kind of switched from reality of actual physical water to just
Paper
talking
water.
about paper. Yeah.
So
And I
the,
think that's where we have to be careful.
the other thing that's a huge concern with this, and this has been the other big dilemma, is so how much water do we go buy today, right? Because whatever we buy, we pay for it, whether we use it or not. So if I go buy this new expensive water and I buy enough for 5 years worth of growth, right? Well, guess what? Who has to pay for that? The current residents are going to pay for that because I got to buy that every year, even though I don't have these new connections online to sell it to. So it's a huge. I honestly, we've spent hours and hours and hours on between the drought and this. This is all I do every day. It seems like is water, and not that we shouldn't, but it's way more time consuming than it's ever been. It's just a huge dilemma on how do you make it equitable and fair, and how do you make sure there's enough. But we are constantly working on this. I mean, me and Steve, Cody. We've had outside firms. We're currently, Mike's just done a ton of work trying to get us an accurate account of where he thinks that we'll be population-wise and use-wise over the next 20 to 30 years. And now we've just sent that to Hanson Allen Luth to try and have them evaluate and say, okay, at the end of our build-out, exactly based on these new numbers, how much water does Riverdale City need? And we just sent that to them this week. And so that's going to be a huge factor in how much water do we buy if we go that route. Because there's only X amount of water left. They're not building any new reservoirs. Weber Basin pretty much has the water they have. And so the only new water they can gain is by conservation.
Sorry, it just seems like at some point we have to decide, are the residents going to be upset at us or are the developers going to be upset at us? And until or unless something changes environmentally, we might get pushed to that point unless we can come up with a really creative, innovative option. And it's uncomfortable to be in this spot. None of us, we all want growth and development and Riverdale Road to be beautiful and to have great new restaurants. But we also, the residents are already so angry about our rate increases. For them to know that we're willing to put them and then paying to cover these costs, I don't see that being a great option either. And if there's actually no water, then that's an even worse option for everybody. So, I mean, I'm open to whatever you guys can do to change and fix the ordinance to address redevelopment and making sure they get credits for the water that they use and credit for irrigation water, maybe on the ERCs too, if there's a way to figure that out for the ordinance, whichever part that would fit into. I think we can make some improvements. I don't think we're going to solve the world's problems today on the drought and water, but I hope we can come up with some good solutions and at least fix the code in the meantime to be more helpful.
Talk to me a little bit about what you're thinking on the irrigation. So you're saying that you want some type of a clause in there that if they own irrigation, that they would get credit for that towards their ERC?
Yeah, or maybe in the however you calculate the ERC, that comes into play.
So we've already done that kind of backwards, but going back to the apartment type condominiums.
Yeah.
So we can easily reroute that, but they would
gonna
have
have
to
a lot
have
of
something
people.
physically tied. They would have to have ownership of that irrigation, right? It couldn't be a leased or it couldn't be borrowed from
Yeah,
family,
like a
right?
permanent connection.
Okay.
That makes sense, yeah.
And we've got to somehow find a way to tie it to that too, because if Christina leaves and the next guy moves in and decides to tear out the xeriscape and bring in all grass, then we got a dilemma. So somehow you got to tie it to the land as well. This is going to be tricky, but we can figure things out. These are the easy ones. I'm more worried about the drive-in and the bot development down here where they're so large. That one's scary. These are quite small on the overall scheme of what we got to bring in here. So, not that they're that easy. I mean, they've been complicated, and that's why we're in this boat. But they're small in comparison.
So Bach threw out a number again today of around 400 to 600 acre feet of water for their development alone. Riverdale currently uses 2,400 acre feet total a year for the whole city.
And that was a year for them, 400 to 600
acre feet
a year. So it's like a 25% increase.
Yeah, that's one development.
Councilor Arnold, do you have something?
So I really like the idea to take the shares away from currency. I think that's a very good point, because once we do this, we create a currency with shares, water shares. So I think pursuing this is a fantastic idea. In the current, I'm not I apologize to the Christinas, but having, I know Ernie very well, but having Grandpa own the shares doesn't matter. But anyway, so I think it has to be owned by them, sold with the land. Just because Grandpa's allowing somebody to use their water doesn't alleviate the problem. It has to be tied into the home or the ERC or whatever it is. Nothing's being credit because it's being lent in a family scenario kind of thing. So, and I think the ordinance needs to reflect all of that. And we look at all commercial development, and we have how much xeriscape needs to be in there. We dictate what goes on in commercial landscaping, right? So why don't we do that in residential?
We do now.
We do both.
Like how much? 40%
max.
We're pretty stringent now.
Any more than that.
Okay. 40% grass?
Max.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you remember, that was a new ordinance that you passed last year, and it's
obviously I don't, but
it's stringent as far as what you typically see. I mean, a lot of the other communities around us have adopted something similar now because of the drought. But like we was on the forefront, we was one of the first two to be able to qualify for that Weber Basin flip-a-strip, which is based on landscaping ordinance. And we was one of the first two to do that. So I think we was proactive that way. So am I getting from the rest of the council that you also want to see some kind of credit for redevelopment for their existing water use? So if they had a historical use there, that would be their credit.
Councilor Merrill and Councilor Hilton, are you still with us?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
We've already accounted for that water. We should be able to easily track that. And it's not something new. It's water that's already here. We could
But only towards the new amount.
Yeah, a credit. That's what I said. Yes.
Yeah, credit.
Okay.
But just in comparison, that 0.91 that's being used to what? That's as a credit. That's less than 1%. That's from just.
So on the commercial, we don't use the ERCs. It's based off of.
Okay, so then how would you get credit in that scenario?
So we would use what their historical use for the last X amount of years has been on that building. Because that's what we're basing, that's how much water we're basing that we need for them.
Okay, because
So
unless you have numbers, you can't.
Right. So if I had a Best Buy that we tore down and they'd been using 20,000 gallons a month for the last 3 years every month, we'd look at a credit based on their previous usage. Because that's not new water we're bringing in. That's water that was already went through the system. We could look at something like that.
How would you do that with, the Farmers Insurance Building and Best Buy and anything else like the, if you were to look at the past usage of Aaron's, I don't think Aaron's is open right now, right? Still. Aaron's ever since the fire.
I think it's still there.
So yeah, it got repaired. It's open.
Yeah, but it's like if you have somebody buys a building and has it sit there for a little bit, and then you go from that usage of 0 to a Shake Shack or whatever.
You could look at that two ways. That's also an incentive for somebody not to buy a building and let it just sit there unused for 3 years too, because they would go, if they was a historically higher user, they would lose credit, right?
Yeah, you don't want them just sitting there running the water dead. I mean,
Well, they couldn't do that either because we monitor that as well. So there's not going to be a perfect scenario that fits every single person, but I mean, you look at them, you pretty much know what them type of buildings are going to use per se. I mean, it's pretty obvious what they use. If you're looking at farmers in general, probably most of their water was used on outside landscaping. You know, there have been 6 or 8 employees inside that flushed a toilet a few times a day, and that's it on that building. So, I mean, we can come up with some stuff and let you look at it. I don't know what else to do.
Okay, is everybody satisfied with that?
I had one other
Somewhat?
note.
Everybody equally dissatisfied?
I guess maybe it's already been addressed if Planning Commission is mentioning it during that process, but I mean, I hate for everyone to get into this situation where they're so far into it, we've issued a permit, and then they realize that they own it. So I don't know if that needs to be changed, to make sure that it's verified that there's a water share prior to a permit being issued so that they know beforehand.
So that's went both ways for us, because then you have somebody else that's like, I want to get started. Let me beg you to get started, and you just won't let me do final occupancy until I have the shares, you know. So that goes both ways. It depends on who thinks of it as a benefit which way. Because we've had other commercial people that was looking for water shares that was confident they was going to find them, and they're like, give us a building permit, let us get started, and just hold us to it that we can't have the water until we have the shares, because they wanted to be building, right? They had their contractor. They just didn't have the water yet. And so that can go either way.
Well, that concerns me a little bit. I brought that up with the rezone request down from agricultural to the R1 4.5 or R1 6 now. We're gonna change the zoning on a piece of property, and we don't know if he's ever gonna even get water shares. But now we've changed the zoning, you know, and plans for that, and made it available for anybody to do whatever, you know, when maybe he said he was gonna do this, but the next guy could do whatever they wanted.
But it hasn't
you know?
come through yet, right?
No,
Yeah.
no, he's going to the planning commission. But what I'm saying is, we don't know if he's ever even going to be able to do that. So I agree with you. Like, he's paid money for a rezone request. I mean, when it is hard to say, well, no, don't even bother asking unless you've got water in your pocket.
Well,
you
and
know?
some of that would be a sunk cost on rezoning, but I mean, when they're getting up to building
Yeah.
and moving forward, I don't understand the process as much as I should, but that's the part that I feel bad about, because I mean, if you've got a foundation dug and you're in the process, I mean, that's tricky. But if
Yeah,
they're
you can
mentioning it in
come up
planning,
and you can come up and say something. Yeah, you bet.
And I don't know how you guys go about doing it, but this was for the Green Hill Apartments. Are they even in? I don't know.
Let me just actually stop you. So
Sorry.
the little technicality about whether it was in the packet or not, it doesn't really matter. It
Okay.
doesn't. I mean, if the council passed it as law, it's
Doesn't
law.
matter.
You know.
Okay.
So whether it was in there, at least Steve, is that right on that?
That's
Like,
correct.
I get it that you didn't have. It wasn't in the packet.
If
And
you
I feel
guys-
bad for that.
So Green Hill also had different sections. So they're in an area that has secondary water.
Okay.
So they're covered by Pine View water on secondary water. And so there is different circumstances for different places in Riverdale. We do have some places in Riverdale that has secondary water.
Okay.
Unfortunately, you're not there, you know, other than unless you have the shares. But like the upper bench, where we border the terrace and that, most everybody up there has a pressurized secondary water system, along with like Shop Code, Green Hill. It just depends kind of on what area you're in, on what water you have type situation.
And maybe when you file for the building permit, the amount, and I'm just thinking with you guys, the amount that you bond or pay, maybe you put that amount in for the water share, so it's there and you hold it and you know about it from the get-go, and then there's none of this like, well, I didn't know type thing because it's connected to your permit.
We can
Just
definitely look
an
at better
idea.
ways to better notify for sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
I think even part of the application process, just checking a box saying that, I agree to do all due diligence,
Yeah.
because if you hire an engineering firm and they're looking at stuff, we can't say, Mike being the lone wolf in that department is gonna communicate all information, we need to be able to say, I understand that there are things and ordinances that need to be researched by engineering, by myself, by whoever.
And I understand that we're in a huge water thing. I'm not denying that. I just think that maybe, like you guys are trying to work through, attaching it to a building permit so everybody knows going forward that they need to
I
get
think
that.
we're all on the same page. We all want to find a solution to, so we
Absolutely.
don't have to shut down development or, so we can meet everybody's needs. It's just hard. It's such a hard situation everybody's in.
It's terrible. It's heartbreaking. We sat down and talked the other day, and I went home that night and didn't sleep because, this young lady's in there. She's on her house. She's trying to close on her house. She's at wit's end.
Interest rates are going up.
And
I don't know.
she's trying to lock. She don't know where she can get water. She, it's not fun at all. And honestly, she's been great to work with. There's not been any. She's probably went away upset with me because I'm telling her what the ordinance says. But she's been great to work with, and she's been nothing but polite. It's just a bad situation right now.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments?
Do we have a timeline or anything?
So, is that a right hand? No? Okay.
I was just wondering if there was a timeline of when we could get this back to us.
Can you give us a little bit of time?
Like 2 weeks?
6 months?
Well,
How do
we've
we
been
operate
working
in
on it for
6
2 months and we haven't gotten very far, but
So would you take it
got
in
all kinds of
steps?
ideas.
Would you take us bringing back with some credit for redevelopment as a first step, and then
Let's update the ordinances
Right.
as you bring it to us.
Yeah,
so.
piece by
We can leave
piece.
it on the agenda.
if you're okay with making
Every
small
meeting.
changes as we go, we can bring back some stuff on some of the smaller stuff that we've just talked about. I think if they have irrigation, we do it at a lower ERC. If we give credit for current existing use, some of them we could bring back fairly quick, if not in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks for sure. Some of the stuff as far as buying blocks of water, we really need to get the information back from Hanson, Allen, Luth and really have time to diverge through a lot of that stuff and probably have some internal conversations in a strategic planning on where you want to head with that. So I think that's a longer term conversation. But some of the small stuff I think we could turn fairly quick. If that works, if that meets, if not, we'll make it work in 2. We'll do what you tell us to do.
we can shoot for 2 weeks, but it is a budget meeting and we're going to be pretty consumed with that. But maybe some of these little changes we could have ready, see what we can help out on that. But
Cord, did you have a comment? Yeah, please. Helps the people that are watching.
And part of that conversation, because of the redevelopment, would be to look at in at least to explore that if you already have a connection, that then there's possible fee in lieu of because you already have a connection. If you're bringing a new connection, water's water and you got to bring water. But if your connection's already there, then what you're really doing is paying for the difference, as Sean said, because the use is going to go up. So is there a in lieu of fee at that point because your connection's already there? Just a thought process.
Is that something you'd like to see him look at too? Okay, come.
Anything and everything. Because if somebody, I'm not getting a credit, and I'm putting in a whole xeriscape in my whole backyard. Well, it's not totally xeriscape, but it's flagstone and moss instead of grass. It's a pretty good expense rather than just mowing it and watering it. So, but I'm not going to get a credit for if my ERC is whatever the number is, 250,000 gallons or 150,000 gallons, whatever that is, and I don't use that. I'm not getting a credit for that. I'm just not using that, right? But the city still needs X amount of dollars for the system.
So your credit's going to be that your water bill's going to go down and everybody else is going up. As far as the ERC, that won't change. And your subdivision, they didn't bring water with. So that was water the city already had. But yeah, if somebody did that in one that had a subdivision, there wouldn't be a credit for it. But the neighbor next to him might be using twice as much. You know, he might have tore out his xeriscape and snuck landscaping back in. I don't know.
Planted a tree.
Okay. Well, that was a good discussion. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and move on. Is there any comments from the city council for this meeting? Councilor Arnold?
I just have one thought. And on these things like Stacy brought tonight, when the state mandates what we're doing, I mean, it's not like, if we don't change our ordinance, say we all said nay, what does that do to us? I mean, the state says we will do this, and then we're coming in and saying, you know, if we all said nay and because we're all against, you know, cannabis, what?
We'll end up in a lawsuit and we'll lose.
So can we have an ordinance that if the state passes something and it's just forced upon us, we don't have to?
Well, I mean, sometimes they give you a little bit of discretion on some of those things. Even this one here, there's some discretionary items that we come up with on this that still fits in with what the state's told us, but we wanted to make sure you guys were on board with it. This one's a tough one because you got conflicting federal statutes and state statutes. So like Sean's guys, it doesn't apply to them even still because they fall under federal regulations, and so they have to abide by that. So that's what's weird about this one. This whole ordinance, even though it's in our statute, doesn't apply to Sean's guys.
I think it's also the police.
And police,
I'm sure
yeah.
police, yeah.
Are you guys under that one too as well? So they're a little bit weird that way, but we are changing our code, and so that has to come in before you guys, and so we routinely do it anyway. But
I was just wondering because we have so much housekeeping and,
yeah,
you know, with it not being unanimous, I'm like,
well, hopefully one of these days the state will quit telling us what to do, Alan. I know that'll happen really soon, but.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Okay, any comments from the city staff?
I'll just briefly, as I mentioned, our next meeting is our budget meeting. We also have that other document ready. Councilor Hanson had asked for that on different rates and stuff for property tax kind of thing. I didn't bring that in just because I didn't want to confuse that tonight, where next meeting is all budgetary stuff. So you will have it. If you want that in advance, be earlier than your packet, it's done, so we can get that to you. But that will primarily be designated for that. Now, it's a little bit different this year because what we will do is we approve an acting budget if we're going to do truth and taxation, because we don't do that until later, which is going to be probably our August 16th meeting, because I believe Braden's gone the first one. So we're going to shoot for that 16th because it has to be done by September 1, our truth and taxation. So why I say we do an acting budget, our plans and our intent are to bring everything into you like we normally would, because we've got our raises, all those kind of things, our fee schedule, all the kind of stuff we would normally do. We will still be bringing that into you. It just won't be designated a final budget until the truth and taxation is done. So the final budget won't be done until September, but we will do this acting budget so we can keep operating and doing what we normally do. So it'll be a little bit weird this year, and any year we do truth and taxation, that's how we have to do it. So it'll be different, but it's still kind of going to be the same thing. It's not even going to look that much different to you, but it will be an acting budget for a couple of months because we've got to cover that gap. So I'm just advising you of that because that's still going to be coming. There's a lot of things we can still approve. The amendments for this year's budget, things like that, those will all still be done. It's just the final budget won't be because we don't know a number until that's done. So,
okay. Any other comments from the city staff? I don't have any comments, so we would need a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Please? Please, somebody
you
second.
can make as I
Can I make a
being the
second?
sixth member.
to close the meeting, I think the chair can do it without a second. So.
Boom. Well, we're going to stand adjourned then for the city council meeting. Yeah. There we go. That one's done. But we are not done.
Have an RDA meeting tonight?
We have an RDA meeting, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
It's quick, though. It is quick. It's just approved.
we can make that credit.
I don't know about
Kids, get going.
Okay.
Straight in.
All right. Counselor Stevens says, let's get going.
We're ready.
Roger.
All right, we're going to call the RDA meeting to order. Thanks, Cord.
Steve.
RDA, yes.
Yeah, you might want to stay for that one.
Oh, you're good. This is just a budgetary thing
Okay,
anyway.
it is 7:43. We're going to call the Riverdale City RDA Board meeting to order for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Let the record show that all board members are present, including Board Member Merrill and Board Member Hilton joining via telephone. We also have members of the city staff as well as members of the public present. We will now have a time for public comment. This is an opportunity to address the redevelopment agency regarding your concerns or ideas. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on to, we have no presentations or reports, so we'll move on to consent items. The first one, consideration to set the following public hearings for June 21st, 2022, a public hearing to receive and consider comments regarding the adoption of the final Riverdale RDA budget for the fiscal year 2023, which is 2022 to 2023. The second is consideration to set a public hearing to receive and consider comments regarding amending the final Riverdale RDA budget for fiscal year 2022, that is 2021 to 2022. Any questions or comments on those consent items? Seeing none, we would need a motion to approve the consent items.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Oh, thank you. Yep, there we go. There's the last one. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. We have no action items, no comments, and so we would need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor? And a third.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
Do we have RDA minutes we haven't approved from the last time? Okay. I just didn't know if they were still hanging out there or not. Thanks.